calling all witches, wizards, and even a few sneaky muggles. Get ready for the ultimate Harry Potter binge, where we uncover plot holes, hidden facts, and fan theories that will leave you spellbound. Let's start the magic.
The books did it better, and Harry Potter fans still can't get over it. Because the movies cut some crucial details that change everything.
This is not normal.
Ron and Hermione's first kiss was actually even more romantic. The movies didn't show us how important Neville actually was. And Voldemort's cruelty has a heartbreaking story behind it. Let's reveal the truth. Hermione and the House Elves.
Such an honor it is.
The Harry Potter movies only introduce us to Kreacher and Dobby, while in the books, these magical creatures are featured much more prevalently. The fourth book explains that house elves cook the food at Hogwarts and magically transport it to the Great Hall. What, you thought it came out of nowhere? Nah, it was the result of hard work from the house elves. And Hermione noticed the underappreciated workers. That's why she launches a whole movement and calls it the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, or SPEW. The movies make no mention of it, although it's a significant part of the story. Not only does it show another side of Hermione, a fighter for equality and justice, but it also adds an interesting element to her relationship with Ron. At first, he says that she's being ridiculous. Yet in the final book, he declares that they should fight to protect the house elves during the Battle of Hogwarts. And that's what prompts Hermione to kiss him for the first time.
I let her do that.
So yeah, their first smooch was much more romantic than what we saw in the movie. Here's the next thing film viewers are left in the dark about. The origins of the Marauders map.
So you mean this map shows everyone? Everyone? Everyone. Where they are, what they're doing, every minute of every day. Brilliant!
This magical object is an integral element of both the books and movies. But if you haven't read the series, you probably have no idea where it came from. The films give a few hints to its connection to Harry's father and his friends, but that's it. Meanwhile, the Prisoner of Azkaban book has a detailed description of its origin. The Marauders map was created by James Potter and his friends Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew. And 3 of them were animagi, which means that they could transform into animals. It explains how Sirius escaped Azkaban and how Peter was able to hide for all those years. What's more, the movies never mention that James could turn into a stag, hence Harry's Patronus, actually. In the films, the stag comes out of nowhere, and it's never explained why this animal is important to the boy. And not only that, but the entire story of the Marauders themselves is omitted. The movies only show them bullying Snape and don't explain how they turned from rowdy teens into wartime heroes. The third film also gives no details as to how Pettigrew betrayed Harry's parents. The conversation with Sirius in the Shrieking Shack, which is a considerable part of the book, is cut down to a few minutes in the movie. It greatly reduces the emotional impact on the viewers, so it should have never been skipped. Just like the next detail, Harry losing his temper.
I just feel so angry all the time.
In the movies, Harry seems to be a pretty restrained young man who accepts the challenges that come his way. But in the books, he's much more emotional, and it's completely understandable why. Everything he faces is a lot to handle for a teen. Harry's biggest breakdown happens after Sirius's death. In the Order of the Phoenix, he literally trashes Dumbledore's office. He smashes objects on the floor and screams at the headmaster for withholding information from him. It's a great scene that shows how much of a burden Harry is carrying. Voldemort's return, the prophecy, the dangers that await. So, his beloved godfather's death becomes a breaking point. And what's also important is, in that scene, Dumbledore agrees with Harry. It becomes a moment of catharsis for both characters. Of course, Sirius's death in the film was devastating as it is, but adding Harry's manifestation of grief would make it even more emotional and show just how broken he felt then. Okay, let's distract ourselves from the heart-wrenching moments and talk about Rita Skeeter, aka the beetle in the jar.
Concerned.
Looks like animagi don't exist in the cinematic Potterverse. First, they omitted the fact that the Marauders, except for Lupin, could turn into animals. And then they also didn't tell us that Rita Skeeter was an animagus.
Whoa!
The nosy reporter from the Daily Prophet could transform into a beetle. That's how she managed to snoop around and learn people's secrets for her sensational articles. By the end of the fourth book, Hermione uncovered this fact, and she actually trapped the sneaky journalist in a jar, when she was in her beetle form, of course. And since Skeeter wasn't a registered animagus, Hermione could blackmail her with it. That's why the journalist stopped spreading BS about Harry and everyone else at Hogwarts. Later, Hermione also made her write an article about the return of Voldemort. None of this is explained in the movies. Not that we'd like to see more of Skeeter, but introducing Hermione's detective skills was certainly interesting. Now onto a sad part again. The sacrifice of the Longbottoms. In the Order of the Phoenix, the trio arrives at St. Mungo's hospital to visit Mr. Weasley, but they wander onto a wrong floor and come across the Longbottoms. In this part of the book, we learn details of their tragic story. Bellatrix Lestrange tortured them to insanity, so for the rest of their lives, they had to stay in the hospital. When Neville visited them, they barely recognized their own son. It's a heartbreaking moment, and it would have been great in the movie, especially since it's a very important scene. Not only does it give more backstory to Neville, but it also shows what the Longbottoms sacrifice in the fight against Voldemort, just like Harry's parents. And here's one more detail missed out from the films that connects Neville and Harry. The boy who was the chosen one.
And who might you be, young man?
When Trelawney made her prophecy about the boy who'd defeat Voldemort, she didn't give any names. She merely talked about the child born as the 7th month dies, to parents who thrice defied the Dark Lord. Both Harry and Neville were born at the end of July, and the parents of both boys were wartime heroes. In the books, it's revealed that the Chosen One could be either of them. Voldemort was actually the one who sealed Harry's fate. Since, just like him, the boy was half-blood, the Dark Lord marked him as his equal. But he could have easily chosen Neville as well. That's exactly why he plays such a crucial role in the series, if you think about it. Even in the first book, Neville is the one to secure the House Cup for Gryffindor.
I'll fight you!
Then, when Harry leaves Hogwarts, Neville becomes the leader of Dumbledore's army. And, most notably, he destroys Nagini, Voldemort's final Horcrux, and makes him mortal. The movie certainly didn't do justice to the prophecy like the books did in explaining it. Plus, they failed to include a vital part about another character. Peter Pettigrew's fate. Do you remember what happened to this despicable traitor in the movies? You probably don't, because it wasn't explicitly shown. Dobby stuns him from the back, and he collapses. And that's the last time we see Pettigrew. Some viewers thought that Dobby killed him, but that's not possible. First of all, a stunning curse only paralyzes a person. And secondly, house elves can't kill others with their magic. Those who read the books know that Wormtail's life ends in a completely different and very symbolic way. It takes us back to the Prisoner of Azkaban, where Harry stops Sirius from killing Peter.
I said we'd take you to the castle. After that, the Dementors can have you.
Thus, unfortunately, he allows him to escape. But Dumbledore explains to Harry that Pettigrew now owes him his life. Then, in the Goblet of Fire, Wormtail cuts off his hand so Voldemort can be reborn, and the Dark Lord gifts him with a new silver hand. Finally, in the Deathly Hallows, Peter tries to strangle Harry, and the boy reminds him of the debt he owes. Pettigrew hesitates for a second, and it's enough for the hand to turn on him. That's right, he dies by his own hand, the one that Voldemort gifted him with. Truly, the Dark Lord worked in mysterious ways. But he wasn't cruel just because, like the movie implies. The books give the real reason for his cruelty. Born without love. The books explain that Voldemort was a descendant of Salazar Slytherin, hence his pride in pure blood and stuff. But that wasn't all. Voldy's mother, Merope Gaunt, fell in love with a Muggle man named Tom Riddle. He didn't reciprocate her feelings, so she bewitched him to get him to marry her. As soon as he freed himself from her magic, Riddle left Merope along with their unborn child. The books explain that it was a symbolic way of showing that Tom Riddle Jr. was conceived in a loveless union. That is why Voldemort was incapable of feeling empathy. He started killing when he was only a teenager. The future Dark Lord's first victims were his father and Muggle grandparents, and he framed his uncle for all these murders. This is a gruesome story, but it's vital for understanding Tom Riddle's transformation into Voldemort. After killing the Riddles, he stole the Gaunt family ring and later turned it into a Horcrux. Interestingly, the stone inside the ring was actually the resurrection stone that Harry used before sacrificing himself. Speaking of which, Harry becoming the Master of Death.
The boy who lived, come to die.
At the climax of his story, Harry comes to meet Voldemort face to face and allows the Dark Lord to kill him. Both in the book and movie, he then finds himself in a place reminiscent of King's Cross Station, where Dumbledore approaches him. That's where the story goes differently. The movie only gives a hint as to how Harry can come back to life, and it's quite confusing, while the book explains that the boy has become the Master of Death. He came to possess all 3 Deathly Hallows: the Invisibility Cloak, the Elder Wand, and the Resurrection Stone. And what's even more important, Harry greeted death as his old friend. This is how Dumbledore elaborates on it in the book.
The true master does not seek to run away from death. He accepts that he must die and understands that there are far, far worse things in the living world than dying.
What's more, with his sacrifice, Harry casts a protection charm over everyone at Hogwarts, just like his mother did when he was a baby. That is why Death Eaters can't kill anyone at the castle starting from that moment. The movie completely fails to mention it, yet it's a critical detail that brings the series full circle. What other parts of the books do you think should have been included in the movies? Share in the comments below.
Why didn't the Ministry of Magic take action against Harry Potter for breaking the rules? Did Harry, Ron, and Hermione have to starve in the Deathly Hallows? And how did Harry actually find out about the Marauders? The Strange Wizard Wonder. One of the biggest head-scratchers in the Harry Potter franchise involves the children's arrival at Hogwarts. Since Harry is a half-blood and Hermione is Muggle-born, it's easy to understand their awe at this new world that they've never experienced before. I mean, if you suddenly saw magic right in front of your eyes for the first time, you'd probably lose your mind as well. Still, it doesn't make sense why the other students are just as excited as them. You see, the majority of the students at Hogwarts come from wizarding backgrounds and a long lineage of wizards. Naturally, you'd expect them to be used to seeing all the magical and fantastical by now. Instead, they're just as shocked by things like magical portraits as Harry is. Their reactions don't make any real sense here. Surely they should have experienced something similar many times before? Or maybe the magic in their homes was limited to card tricks. Who knows? Harry broke the rules. You know what they say, rules are meant to be broken. However, when you're a wizard in training, you're expected to be better behaved than the average teenager. You know, the whole great power and great responsibility thing. When your name is Harry Potter, though, you get away with a lot more, as we discovered in The Prisoner of Azkaban. At the beginning of the movie, the 13-year-old Harry used the Lumos charm to create a light under his covers to read a book, when he could have easily just turned on a lamp. Harry's actions were strictly forbidden. However, as underage magic is considered one of the deadliest sins. This is why every wizard under the age of 17 has a trace charm placed on them, so the Ministry of Magic can see what they're up to at all times. Yet, nothing ever happened to Harry. The Ministry said nothing and he got away with defying the rules. Truth be told, this was a misdemeanor and it's unlikely that he would have been expelled for creating light to read a book. But it's one of several examples where Harry used magic illegally. It's all in the eyes. All Harry Potter fans know that Harry and his mother share the same eye color. While in the books, the color is green, this was changed for the movies, since Daniel Radcliffe's eyes are blue. Expectedly, the filmmakers hired an actress with blue eyes to portray Lily Potter. Yet, in the Deathly Hallows Part 2, we experience one of Snape's flashbacks to a younger version of Lily, where she now has brown eyes. What's even weirder is that Snape had told Harry that he has his mother's eyes. In all likelihood, this was probably a brief oversight by the filmmakers. Maybe the actress's eye color was meant to be changed in post-production, or someone forgot to get her blue contact lenses. It's actually quite funny though, since the producers had been extremely strict when casting for Harry Potter, and had refused any brown-eyed kids without hesitation. And then this happened later in the film series. It's like some form of cosmic justice for brown-eyed kids everywhere. Hogwarts suspect safety protocols. Look, for a school of witchcraft and wizardry, Hogwarts isn't exactly high on safety. If a bunch of kids can cause havoc on the premises with simple magic, you probably need to rethink your security plans. Case in point, Harry, Hermione, and Ron were able to use the simple Alohomora spell to unlock a door that guards a three-headed dog, a giant chess game, and the Philosopher's Stone. Considering how entry-level the spell is, it doesn't make sense that it would be all that stands between someone and the fabled Philosopher's Stone. Also, why bother putting a lock on the door in the first place? I mean, with such easy access, is anyone surprised that people wanted to snatch the Philosopher's Stone? Sure, you could argue there were other obstacles to get through before getting to the stone, but why teach the students this unlocking spell if there are locked doors around? It's like a sign pointing to a giant red button that says, "Don't touch." You just know that they're gonna do the opposite. Food for thought. The great part about being a wizard is that you can use magic for just about anything. Heck, you can swish your wand, say a few words over your burger, and give yourself a 2-for-1 special. So, why did Harry, Ron, and Hermione have to go hungry in the Deathly Hallows? While on the run from Voldemort and his Death Eaters, the trio found themselves with a lack of food. By that time, though, they'd already learned about the law of elemental transfiguration, which meant they could have duplicated whatever they found or had around them, including food. All it would have taken is for them to catch a fish or two and they could have fed themselves for quite some time, and no one would need to starve. What's even more unbelievable is that Hermione seems to have totally forgotten about this. And that's completely out of character since she remembers absolutely everything. The whereabouts of the wizarding community. The Tri-Wizard Tournament saw French and Bulgarian witches visiting Hogwarts. It's displayed that there's a wizarding community outside of Britain, and they stay in regular touch with each other. In the Deathly Hallows, though, the British magical community is left to fight Voldemort and his supporters all on their lonesome. Surely the Dark Lord would be a threat to these other countries as well, so why didn't they show up to support Hogwarts here? It's a bizarre story loophole that hasn't quite been addressed, and leaves many more questions for us to ponder. Maybe there could be some weird international relations policy between the countries, but that's unlikely since it's in everyone's best interest to put a stop to Voldemort here. If a member of your community is under attack, it makes sense to put up a united front, right? I mean, do they only show up when there's tea and biscuits on offer? Muggle technology. In the Chamber of Secrets, we meet Colin Creevey, who loves to take pics of life at Hogwarts. His camera follows him around as he captures everyone in the moment. However, there's a slight problem here. Muggle technology isn't allowed at Hogwarts. While Colin's camera is reportedly powered by magic and not batteries, it's technically frowned upon, as described by author J.K. Rowling. Writing on Pottermore, she stated, "There's another reason for most wizards' avoidance of Muggle devices, and that is cultural. The magical community prides itself on the fact that it does not need the many, admittedly ingenious, devices that Muggles have created to enable them to do what can be so easily done by magic." Maybe if Colin's camera had actually looked like something more magical, it would have been more believable. Also, if Muggle technology could be powered by magic, why didn't more of the kids have Game Boys? Honestly, if you're at boarding school, a portable video game console is a basic necessity. The race-swapped character. The recasting of Lavender Brown is one of the most controversial talking points of the Harry Potter film series. In the earlier movies, the character was portrayed by 2 actresses of color, Jennifer Smith and Kathleen Colley. However, in The Half-Blood Prince, Lavender was played by Jessie Cave, a white actress. Naturally, this created a heated debate because of the race swapping, even though the most commonly stated reason for the change was that the studio needed a more established actress, and Lavender hadn't been technically introduced. If you recall, Lavender was never referred to by name, nor did she have a speaking role until The Half-Blood Prince. That being said, every Harry Potter fan knew exactly who she was, and the recasting raised more than a few eyebrows with the viewers as well as the film industry. Nowadays, you can't imagine the studio going through with something like this. Even back then, this was a decision that wasn't warmly received. Harry's knowledge of the Marauders. While making a film, you need to pretend like your audience isn't familiar with the source material, because sometimes they aren't. In the case of the Marauders, this is a good example of how the filmmakers just presumed the viewers had read The Prisoner of Azkaban and knew what they were referring to. For those who read the book, you'll recall how all the details about the Marauders and their respective nicknames were revealed at length. Yet, this was something that was excluded from the film. Anyway, a few films later, Harry refers to Sirius as Padfoot and Peter as Wormtail, their Marauder nicknames. So, how exactly did he get this vital information about them? In all fairness, this could have been something that was revealed off-screen. However, considering how big a deal it is in the Harry Potter mythology, you'd think some screen time would be dedicated to it, because you know what they say about assumptions, right? When you make a series of movies, it's highly likely that there will be some inconsistencies and questions along the way. After all, filmmakers are only human, and there are already so many boxes they need to tick when creating a Harry Potter movie. But hey, none of those plot holes made us enjoy the movies any less, so it's all good at the end of the day, right?
From untrue gossip This is a rumor I would like to disperse.
To real-life fears and completely different casting decisions. Here's everything you didn't know about the Harry Potter films. Do you still believe the long-standing rumor that Daniel Radcliffe broke 100 wands on the set? Well, he actually didn't. About a year ago, the actor finally revealed the truth.
It's not that many, guys.
At the same time, Dan never denied that he broke a certain number of wands.
I used to, use them and, drum on my leg with it the whole time.
But let's not exaggerate.
I was probably 12. Maximum, absolute maximum of 20.
And also, remember that he wasn't the only one, since most of the other actors also broke a few. But at least they didn't kill anyone. No fantasy franchise goes without the loss of a few important characters. Some of the most heartbreaking deaths in Harry Potter were Sirius, Dumbledore, and Fred. But there could have been more. For example, did you know that Mr. Weasley wasn't supposed to survive Nagini's attack? Rowling left him alive just because he was the only good father figure in the series. Another character who could have died was Hagrid. His demise would have certainly broken quite a few hearts. But not as much as our beloved Ron's passing. That's right, J.K. Rowling seriously thought about killing him off too.
It's a real relief to be able to talk about it all.
Thank God she isn't George Martin and didn't turn Harry Potter into another Game of Thrones. Now, on to merrier facts. Everyone has heard of the fanfics where Hermione and Draco become a couple. But there was another kind, where Draco and Harry fall in love.
I think it's called Drarry or whatever, Draco and Harry combined.
Seems incredible? Well, Tom Felton doesn't agree. While playing fan or fanfiction with AOL, he revealed that it could have been possible. Harry was constantly crushing on Draco. He just couldn't hide it, the actor said. Yeah, if you think about it, he was obsessed with his arch-nemesis at times, especially in The Half-Blood Prince. But here's the funniest thing. There were also artworks of Drarry.
I've seen some rather horrendous pictures over the years, which Daniel and I definitely did not share with the world. My brother had it as his screensaver on his phone for a while.
Well, that's what brothers do. And here's a fact about another not-so-good guy. No one could have ever played a better Snape than the late Alan Rickman. But just like everyone else, he was quite confused about his character in the beginning. Why did Dumbledore trust him? Was he really Voldemort's spy? We also asked these questions before Snape showed his story to Harry, but Alan Rickman learned about it way before us and everyone else involved in filming. As Rowling said, she told him what lay behind the word always. And it helped the actor play Snape in a much more nuanced way as he understood his motivations. At times, Alan would even argue with the director if he felt Snape wouldn't do something. And he never explained why.
Chris would literally say to him, "Why are you doing that like that?" He said, "I'll tell you later."
What a good secret keeper he was. I wonder if the next actor would have blurted it out. Every fan knows that Ron's biggest fear is spiders. But are you aware that the same can be said about the actor who played him? It turns out that Rupert Grint's on-screen reactions to the spiders in the Chamber of Secrets were genuine. Filming the Forbidden Forest scene with Aragog and its, children was terrifying for him. In fact, the actor felt so uneasy that he never even watched the full scene.
We kind of added visual effects, all these kind of moving ones on the ground, and it was that I just couldn't. I still can't watch that scene. It's absolutely terrifying.
He has a point. Those giant spiders were extremely scary. But there was a character who was more frightening for some fans. Dolores Umbridge's cruel dictatorship-like ambitions, combined with her seemingly innocent looks, makes her a perfect character for a horror movie, don't you think so? Well, now you will, because even the master of this genre was terrified by Dolores. Check out Stephen King's review of The Order of the Phoenix and his description of Umbridge. With her girlish voice, toad-like face, and clutching stubby fingers, she's the greatest make-believe villain to come along since Hannibal Lecter, he said. You can't argue with that. And speaking of the actual main villain of the series, did you know that he could have been different? When the casting call for young Tom Riddle in the Chamber of Secrets was announced, Eddie Redmayne was there to audition. He turned out to be a long-term fan of the series. Over the years, he even wanted to play one of the Weasleys, yet he only auditioned for Riddle. "I properly failed and didn't get a callback," the actor commented, but as we all know, it wasn't the end for him. Years later, Eddie got the role of Magizoologist Newt Scamander in Fantastic Beasts. It's certainly a bigger and better role, isn't it? So, as they say, everything happens for the best. Now let's see another actor who also wanted to play an entirely different role in the saga. Jason Isaacs was brilliant as Lucius Malfoy, but it almost didn't happen. The actor nearly passed on the role because he wanted to play Gilderoy Lockhart. Director Chris Columbus actually told him to try out for Lucius. Initially, Jason wanted to say no. He didn't want to become a cliché and play another villain after Captain Hook and Peter Pan. Luckily, the director managed to convince him. In fact, Jason played more than one part in the series. Did you know that he also voiced the Basilisk? Yes, he doesn't say a word, but the creepy hissing sound is Jason's work. And as we continue the topic of different actors trying out for Harry Potter roles, although Helena Bonham Carter owned the role of Bellatrix Lestrange, she wasn't the first choice. Initially, the part was offered to the late Helen McRory. But when she got pregnant, she bowed out of playing Voldy's most loyal Death Eater. So the casting crew had to keep looking. And they found Helena, the real jewel for the role. As we know, McCrory also joined the series a little bit later and played Bella's sister, Narcissa Malfoy. So it all turned out for the best as both actresses were perfect for their roles. But what if no actors were needed to bring Harry Potter to life? Warner Brothers initially wanted to make the Harry Potter saga an animated series. They even thought of combining multiple books into one movie. What's more, Steven Spielberg was the first director they had in mind, and he wanted to make an animated film with Haley Joel Osment voicing Harry.
I see dead people.
That sounds a little weird. So eventually the studio decided against the idea, and we were lucky to get 8 live-action movies. Yet I still wonder sometimes what Spielberg's version would have looked like. Anyway, we're on to the next fact. Some people might think that the child actors in Harry Potter only had fun all day long, but in fact they had to keep up with their real-life schoolwork. However, they barely had time to do their homework after shooting. So the crew came up with an idea that fit everyone. When they filmed the classroom scenes, the kids were doing their actual homework. Not only did it help them study, but it also created a better and more realistic atmosphere for the school scenes. And here's another fact from the beginning of the movie series. For longtime fans wondering why Harry didn't have green eyes, it was quite an important element that was repeated multiple times in the books. Initially, Dan Radcliffe was supposed to wear green contact lenses, but he had a serious allergy to them. So they decided to let it be. A similar thing happened to Emma Watson. In the books, Hermione had prominent front teeth, so fans expected her to have those in the movies too. The crew actually tried filming a few scenes where Emma wore prosthetic teeth, but she had trouble speaking with them, so the idea was scrapped. Are you ready for one more fact about Emma? While filming the first movie, the Hermione actress had a little tragedy in her life. Her pet hamster Millie passed away, and she was understandably very sad about it. So the cast and crew decided to help her deal with the loss. They all gathered to have a funeral for Millie. The set department even created a custom-made coffin for the animal.
And it had a velvet lining and a silver plaque on the front, which had Millie's name engraved on it.
Needless to say, it was very touching for Emma, so she remembered it as the years went by. And she even dedicated one of her awards to her late hamster.
Rest in peace, Millie. This one's for you.
How cute! From Hermione's wittiest line to Malfoy being turned into a ferret.
Oh, my father will hear about this. This is my threat.
And to Harry looking drunk or high. Tune into our ranking of the funniest scenes from the Harry Potter movies.
Bloody hell!
Number 10, sorting out Hermione's priorities. In the Sorcerer's Stone, the main trio barely escape being eaten by Fluffy. When they are finally safe, Hermione says the line that became one of her most iconic moments.
I'm going to bed before either of you come up with another clever idea to get us killed. Or worse, expelled.
And even when the series was over, it remained Emma Watson's favorite.
Just seemed like the wittiest, cleverest line.
Rupert agreed that it was awesome and added that he still remembered what he said after it. It was just as funny, right?
She needs to sort out her priorities.
If you think about it, this moment isn't only hilarious, it also shows the amazing dynamic between Ron and Hermione, and so does our next moment. Number 9, the emotional range of a teaspoon. This one is from the Order of the Phoenix. After Harry kisses a crying Cho Chang, he talks about it with his friends. Ron can't keep himself from teasing his mate.
That bad at it, aren't you?
Hermione immediately stands up for Harry.
I'm sure Harry's kissing was more than satisfactory.
She went on to explain why Cho was so tearful. Cho missed Cedric, probably felt guilty about kissing Harry, and was also worried about failing her exams. For Ron, it seemed like too many feelings to handle at once.
One person couldn't feel all that. It'd explode.
And Hermione had the perfect response.
Just because you've got the emotional range of a teaspoon.
In the next moment, the three of them are laughing their heads off because of how funny the line was. Interesting fact, this laughter wasn't scripted, but it sounded so natural and all of them looked so cute that it remained in the final cut. And here's another sweet scene. Number 8, the rubber duck function. We all remember how fascinated Mr. Weasley was with Muggle culture. So the first time he gets to speak to Harry at their home, he wants to know all about it. And he asks Harry a question that utterly perplexes the young man.
What exactly is the function of a rubber duck? Oh.
Did you know that this line has a funny behind-the-scenes story? The actor Mark Williams, who played Mr. Weasley, actually came up with this question himself. In fact, he thought up quite a few options. At each take, he'd ask a different question about the Muggle world. In the end, the director chose the one that he considered the funniest. And the rest is history. I wish we could see those other takes and all the questions he asked. Now, on to the next moment. Number 7, the Bogart scene. It was a lot of fun to watch the students turn their fears into something to laugh at. Transforming a snake into a clown and adding rollerblades onto a huge spider's legs, it's all very amusing. But the funniest part of this scene was Neville's Bogart.
Ridiculous!
Snape wearing Neville's grandma's clothes. It's classic! For one of the actors from the saga, it became their favorite scene. And you won't guess who because he's not even in it. Gary Oldman once said that the Bogart scene had always stuck with him, all because the imagination behind it was incredible.
That you could disarm the Bogart with laughter and humor.
Yeah, it does sound pretty powerful. Probably the only person who didn't like the Bogart idea was Malfoy.
This class is ridiculous.
Yet he also had his funny scene in the series. Number 6, Draco Malfoy, the ferret. The moment the imposter Mad-Eye Moody turned Malfoy into a ferret was oh so memorable. It was amazing to see this arrogant young man get that kind of payback for his words.
Oh no, you don't listen to me!
He was actually pretty cute, don't you think? McGonagall was the only one who didn't appreciate the joke somehow.
Is that a student? Technically, it's a ferret.
That's logical. You might be wondering how they filmed this scene. First of all, you should know that they didn't actually turn Tom Felton into a ferret.
Luckily, the ferret wasn't really me. Luckily, they brought in a stunt double ferret.
In fact, they even brought 2. A fake one was used for the ferret that was thrown up and down. And they also had a real trained ferret.
It was a live ferret, and they gave me trousers with double insides in, one for the ferret to go down, and obviously to protect it from scratching my leg.
And all their efforts paid off because the scene was amazing, just like the next one. Number 5, the introduction of Luna. Fans love her for her eccentric ways and airy voice. But the first scene with Luna certainly remains the most memorable. Remember how Harry sees the Thestrals for the first time and no one else can see them? And Luna is the only person who backs him up.
I can see them too.
Yet it isn't really reassuring.
You're just as sane as I am.
Especially because the next thing she starts talking about is Nargles.
It's a charm, actually. Keeps away the nargles.
How random she is and how awkward everyone else seems. Truly, this scene is comedic gold.
I hope there's pudding.
And it was all thanks to the talented Ivana Lynch. Later, when the cast shared their favorite lines, she said that "You're just as sane as I am" is hers.
It just gives no comfort at all to whoever she says it to.
She's totally right. Now, let's recall. Number 4, Murder Me, Harry. Bloody hell! Those robes Ron wore to the Yule Ball. He looked especially unhappy when he saw Harry wearing normal and, frankly, pretty impressive robes.
Well, I expect yours are more traditional. Traditional? They're ancient.
Yeah, that's when traditional doesn't mean good.
I look like my great Aunt Tessie.
And it gets worse.
Smell like my great Aunt Tessie.
Interestingly, the costume department explained how they created those robes. They just kept in mind that Ron's mom was supposed to be the one making them, so the costume had to be clumsy and fashionably ugly. It was all done on purpose and led to quite an iconic look. Yet Ron had only one thing to say about them.
Murder me, Harry.
His hilarious suffering lightened up the mood in The Goblet of Fire, which was a pretty dark film. And the next scene did a similar thing for The Deathly Hallows Part 1. Number 3, The Seven Potters. When all of his friends transform into him, Harry obviously feels pretty embarrassed, and the way all of them react to it is brilliant to watch.
Wow, we're identical.
Harry, your eyesight really is awful.
Share in the comments whom you liked the most as imposter, Harry. Our favorite is Fleur.
Bill, look away. I'm hideous.
It looked funny behind the scenes as well.
Bill, look away. I'm hideous.
Roll's not coming off.
But Dan wasn't too embarrassed to film it. In fact, he was happy to do it.
I was thrilled. That was one of the things I was delighted about, was how good I looked in Fleur's costume. I look fantastic in women's clothing.
It took 3 days to shoot this scene, and director David Yates said that by the end of it, Dan became remarkably good at embodying his female co-stars. But we bet that he wouldn't be able to embody this fabulous woman. Number 2, using the ultimate spell. At the beginning of the Battle of Hogwarts, McGonagall is the one to give orders. She even tells Neville to blow up the bridge to keep the Death Eaters away.
To blow it up! Boom! Boom! Wicked!
Next comes one of the most epic moments in the entire franchise as McGonagall revives the Hogwarts statues.
Pier totem locomotor!
But moments later, epicness turns into hilariousness.
I've always wanted to use that spell.
At this moment, McGonagall reminds us of a kid who gets to unwrap a long-awaited Christmas present. And the look on Mrs. Weasley's face makes it even funnier. She looks utterly shocked by everything going on around her. This scene is the ultimate McGonagall moment as it shows how ferocious she is. Even Maggie Smith agrees with that. I suppose I'm the one who keeps them in order. I'm really fairly fierce, she said about her character. Now, are you ready for the funniest moment of the saga? Number 1, Harry on Felix Felicis. This scene was pretty different in the books. Harry became super confident after taking the liquid luck potion, but in the movies he behaves as if he's drunk or high.
Harry!
Sir.
Also, he's very logical.
Is that an actual acromantula?
A dead one, I think, sir.
And funny.
Not to mention the pincers.
It's pretty hysterical to watch, but it turns out that Dan Radcliffe doesn't agree. He thinks his acting in The Half-Blood Prince is the worst. I hate it. My acting is very one-note, and I can see I got complacent, and what I was trying to do just didn't come across, the actor commented. He shouldn't be so critical of himself, because his comedic timing in this scene was awesome. Do you agree with our rating? What other funny scenes would you add? Share in the comments below. From Hagrid to Dumbledore. Attention! And from Umbridge to McGonagall.
Boom!
Hogwarts had all kinds of teachers, lovable and hated, weak and mighty. And the time has come to rank them. Number 10, Sybil Trelawney. The professor of divination came off as a very eccentric lady. Most of the time it seemed like she barely knew what she was doing, and some people, including Hermione, thought she was a fraud. In fact, her lesson was the only one Miss Granger detested, and that says a lot. However, Professor Trelawney wasn't that bad. She was an actual seer. It was her who made the prophecy about the Chosen One that changed everything for Voldemort and, pretty much, for the entire wizarding world.
For neither can live while the other survives.
And Trelawney had another prediction in The Prisoner of Azkaban, which also came true.
He will return tonight.
Sorry? It didn't take Harry, or us, long to understand what she meant, as shortly afterwards, Pettigrew escaped to reunite with his master. So yeah, Trelawney was weird, but not completely incompetent. Yet the next professor was still better than her in many ways. Number 9, Rubus Hagrid. I assure you, it pains us to place him solo on the list, but can you really say that he was the best care of magical creatures professor? Hagrid had a propensity for introducing the students to dangerous beasts, which he deemed interesting.
They let you ride them now. What?
Unfortunately, he never realized the risks, even when people got injured.
I'm the teacher, I'll do it.
But on the other hand, Hagrid knew a huge deal about various magical creatures, so it wouldn't be easy to find another teacher as knowledgeable as him. He was passionate about his subject because he loved animals so much. What's more, Hagrid had the necessary skills to tame almost any beast he could find. And we can't ignore the fact that Harry and his classmates had fun in his classes.
There's no Hogwarts without you, Hagrid.
So if only he was a bit more careful choosing creatures, he'd be a marvelous professor. However, the next one also presented a danger. Number 8, Alistair Mad Eye Moody. We should rather say Barty Crouch Jr., of course.
I'll show you mine if you show me yours.
The real Moody was never a defense against the dark arts professor. It was Crouch all along. He was a Death Eater who planned to send Harry to his doom. Surely that means he was a terrible teacher. Oddly enough, Crouch was quite a skilled wizard. He played his role for an entire school year, and no one, including Dumbledore himself, suspected anything. And he also taught his students quite a lot, including showing them the unforgivable curses. It affected them a lot, but it was actually good that they got to see how those spells work, given what was coming next with Voldemort returning and all.
You need to know what you're up against.
We're pretty sure that if the real Moody got to teach defense, we'd put him much higher on the list. After all, he was a brilliant orer.
Pray!
But we'll never know what kind of teacher he'd really be, unlike the next professor. Number 7, Dolores Umbridge. Although Voldemort was the main villain in the series, most fans detest this woman even more. She was definitely the worst professor Harry ever had. Umbridge didn't even teach her students one spell the entire year. So why is she not the lowest on our list? Well, because we have to give credit to her wizarding skills, which weren't poor after all. Umbridge had a great grasp of a number of spells, including the dark ones. She even knew how to perform unforgivable curses, as she planned to use them on Harry at some point. So, however much you hate her and this habit of hers, Umbridge was actually a powerful witch, in a way. But let's move on to more pleasant characters. Number 6, Horace Slughorn.
Merlin's beard!
He was one of the best potions professors Hogwarts ever had. Not better than Snape, of course, but we'll get back to him later. Slughorn had an eye for talent. He even formed the Slug Club, where he'd invite his best students, including Harry. The professor had a deep knowledge of his subject. Plus, he was a nice person and managed to build a warm relationship with his pupils. And even more importantly, he fought on Hogwarts' side in the final battle against Voldemort, which was quite a feat for a wizard of his age. But of course, the main reason why Dumbledore hired him wasn't for his knowledge of potions. It was because of his memories about young Tom Riddle.
But this is very dark stuff, very dark indeed.
And sharing them was crucial to the whole story. So we must give credit to Slughorn for that too. Are you ready to move on? Number 5, Phileas Flitwick. This little man was extremely well educated on the topic of charms. Every year, he'd teach a great deal of spells to his students. If it wasn't for his subject, we wouldn't have seen this iconic scene.
You're saying it wrong. It's Leviosa, not Leviosa.
And in the Battle of Hogwarts, Flitwick took one of the leading roles to protect the castle. Given all those feats, it's not surprising that he taught at the school for decades. Unfortunately, the next professor didn't have such an honor. Number 4, Remus Lupin. He's always been Harry's favorite professor, and for good reason. Lupin was excellent at teaching defense against the dark arts. His lessons were useful and entertaining, as well as practical.
Ridiculous!
Besides, Lupin was the one to teach Harry how to use the Patronus charm, which saved his life several times.
Expecto Patronum!
And the professor turned out to be one of Harry's father's best friends, which made their connection even stronger. The boy went so far as to copy his practice-based teaching style when he taught Dumbledore's army. Lupin had only one drawback, which made him potentially dangerous. He was a werewolf, and when he accidentally forgot to drink the potion that made him harmless, we all remember what happened. Lupin wasn't only an amazing professor, he was also a powerful wizard. He was one of the members of the Order of the Phoenix who only accepted highly capable warlocks into its rank. Sadly, Lupin passed away at the end, just like the next professor. Number 3, Severus Snape. On a personal level, he pretty much failed Harry. They hated each other, and Snape was often unfair to him and abused him verbally. But that doesn't mean that he was a bad professor. On the contrary, he was brilliant.
I can teach you how to bewitch the mind and ensnare the senses.
As we learned from the Half-Blood Prince, Snape even fixed some mistakes in the workbook. He was a strong wizard. He came up with his own spells, including some dangerous ones. And he was one of the few warlocks who knew how to fly. Most importantly, Snape was arguably the bravest character in the entire franchise. He was the only one to have deception skills high enough to make even Voldemort think that he was loyal to him. Meanwhile, he was doing everything Dumbledore asked him to.
Always.
Undoubtedly, if it wasn't for Snape, Harry would never have defeated Voldemort. And the absence of the next teacher would also have changed the entire story. Number 2, Minerva McGonagall. The Professor of Transfiguration wasn't one to tolerate fools in her classroom. At times, she could be quite intimidating and demanding. But in fact, McGonagall cared deeply for her students and encouraged them to do their best in her class. She was exceptionally smart as a teacher and as a witch. The professor was able to perform advanced acts of transfiguration. This one, for example, is totally worth mentioning.
Protect us! Do your duty to our school!
She was also an animagus.
Uh-oh.
And in the Battle of Hogwarts, the professor used all her expertise to keep the Death Eaters at bay.
I've always wanted to use that spell.
After Voldemort's defeat, McGonagall became the new headmaster of Hogwarts. This position suited her perfectly, as she surely was second to only one other wizard in the series. Number 1, Albus Dumbledore. The headmaster wasn't only the most powerful wizard at Hogwarts, he was the greatest in the whole series. Even Voldemort himself feared the old man. But what made him so strong? First of all, Dumbledore was exceptionally talented. After all, do you know anyone else who could work as both Professor of Transfiguration and Defense Against the Dark Arts? Because that's exactly what Dumbledore did before becoming headmaster. Whatever position he held, he was always an inspiration to his students.
Happiness can be found even in the darkest of times, if one only remembers to turn on the light.
Dumbledore was Harry's main mentor. He was the one to train the boy and answer his questions. Although not all of them at once, of course.
But now is not the time to tell us.
And when it came to fighting, he managed to defeat dark magic with a single spell. It seemed like there was nothing Dumbledore couldn't do.
Being me has its privileges.
What other professors would you add to this list, and in what spot? Share in the comments below. ever wondered what's really stopping the Weasleys from conjuring a big old bag of gold after they tragically lost their house? Or how could Dumbledore set a whole feast within a second if it was supposedly impossible to conjure stuff out of nowhere?
The feast begin.
And finally, why couldn't Harry's parents just come back as ghosts to haunt Voldemort? Spells are not as simple as they seem. A lot of spells look pretty simple. It seems like it's all a matter of simply waving a wand to create magic, right?
Don't forget the nice wrist movement we've been practicing. The swish and flick. Everyone? The swish and flick.
Nope, it takes a lot of effort to make a decent spell. Spells work as the controlled manifestations of magic that can move objects, create things, and even levitate people. They're achieved through an incantation that lets wizards and witches cast a spell to make something magical happen. Some spells are straightforward and require the simple wave of a wand.
Oculus Reparo.
Others are a little more complex and require more skilled wizardry, like wandless magic.
Even in the darkest of times, if one only remembers to turn on the light.
Either way, it's incredibly fun and delicate handiwork. If you need something to levitate or move, then some spells need the right wand movement and the perfect incantation, and boom, it's done. But the more intricate the spell, the more emotion needed in order for it to be pulled off. A great example of this is a Patronus, the spell that requires a happy memory or a jolly feeling to be conjured up.
Expecto Patronum!
Well, that's the level of emotion needed for it. It's not about how loud you say a spell, it's about how you channel a sense of happiness in order to achieve it, and that takes skill. If the person casting the spell isn't in a chipper mood, then it just won't work. Magic can't make money. There are no overnight rags to riches stories in magic. Gamp's law of elemental transfiguration, which dictates 5 principal exceptions of how magic morphs, manipulates, and alters elements, prohibits magically packing one's Gringotts wizarding bank account with gold. If you ever wondered why Hogwarts wasn't packed with a bunch of bougie rich kids like Malfoy, the reason is that Gamp's law would never let a get-rich-quick spell slide. Sorry, Weasleys, no wizard can cheat code their way into a lavish life.
That's rubbish!
If you're wondering how else Gamp's law affects other elements, such as how food can't pop out of nowhere, you're gonna have to keep watching to find out why this law can sometimes be a killjoy. Magic can't create real love. No matter how unbearable it was for Hermione to see Lavender kissing Ron, she had no easy way to ease her pain.
Excuse me, I have to go and vomit.
No spell could stop Ron from making stupid mistakes that would force him to tell Hermione how he felt right away. Well, she could have made him drink the Verita serum, a powerful truth serum, and hear what he really thought of Lavender. But the use of this potion is controlled by the British Ministry of Magic, and we all know that Hermione is a good girl who would never fall for that, right?
You're saying it wrong. It's Leviosa, not Leviosa.
However, there is one spell you could easily find at Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, which a young and naive soul could mistake for love. Remember Amortentia, the supposed love potion that drove Ron crazy?
It's beautiful, isn't it? The moon. Divine.
You'll be bummed to know that it wasn't really the creation of love. The potion just produces infatuation and obsession. It affects people differently because it has a distinct aroma depending on who the target of the potion is. If you like the smell of freshly cut grass, like Hermione, then that aroma would be in a potion meant for you. But no matter how alluring the smell, real feelings of love, it does not make. Why's that? Because love isn't a tangible feeling. And there's just no way to bottle love and use it in a spell to recreate it in any way. And speaking of things that can and can't be made with magic, we promise to explain another rule about why food, like money, can't be conjured up from thin air. Here's the mystery of the Hogwarts feast and why food can't exist out of nowhere. Magic can't conjure up food. According to Gamp's law of elemental transfiguration, you can summon, transform, and even increase food, but to make it pop out of nowhere with no source is impossible. Now, you're thinking, hold on, one of the most iconic moments in the Philosopher's Stone is the dining hall scene where Dumbledore says the words,
"Let the feast begin."
and then everyone's plate is magically filled with food. Well, Dumbledore didn't have a menu in the back of his head that he made appear. The food had already been prepared in the kitchen by the house elves of Hogwarts. Dumbledore didn't actually conjure up the food, he simply transferred it from one place to another, from the kitchen to the plates. Yep, the story checks out. Dumbledore performed magic within the boundaries of Gamp's law. If you lost someone, you can't bring them back to life. A fundamental rule of magic is that you can't bring back the dead. The most important thing to note is that death in the real world and death in the magical world have some differences, but also have a great deal of similarities too. Death is permanent and irreversible in both. However, in the magic world, witches and wizards can live as ghosts if that's what they wanted before their deaths. It's called leaving an imprint, and it's the wizards and witches who fear death that choose this afterlife path. Nearly Headless Nick explains this to Harry in the book version of The Order of the Phoenix. We can presume that Harry's own parents, James and Lily, didn't fear death to that extent, if at all, and so they never left imprints of themselves in ghost form. That does explain a lot about how ghosts come to be, but there are more question marks about death that have a lot of people wondering if there are any loopholes that allow for the dead to make a return. For example, does the killing curse, known as Avada Kedavra, create ghost versions of its victims? And what roles do the Horcruxes and the Resurrection Stone play in reincarnation? We looked into that and found some awesome answers for you. The rules of resurrection in the magical world. Firstly, there's the Killing Curse, which is one of the 3 unforgivable curses that causes a swift and unexpected death. This dark spell does manifest a ghost of the person who the spell is used on, but to call that bringing someone back to life is a little bit of a stretch here. Secondly, there are the infamous Horcruxes, which, amongst other things, are created following the act of murder and can grant immortality to the murderer, creator. The 3 Horcruxes that Voldemort's soul were divided into were not made to bring him back to life, because he was never actually dead. If Voldemort had died, the power from those Horcruxes would never have been able to bring him back to his normal, disturbing form. And lastly, there's the Resurrection Stone, which allowed Harry to see his parents and his other loved ones before his face-off with Voldemort. However, these were only shadows. They weren't real people. Harry wouldn't have been able to touch them or feel them because they weren't incarnated versions he got to speak to. And those are some of the cruel rules that come with death in Harry Potter. Animals cannot be turned into people. Unfortunately, the Thorough Ministry had strict rules about any spells that would lead to some kind of fun that don't really serve the purposes of magic. And you knew this was coming. You can't turn animals into people. What a bummer. But don't be down, because there is a bit of a loophole on this one if you really wanted to be on the same level as animals. It's actually possible to turn yourself into an animal using magic. It's called being animagus, but it's not just a spell anyone can pull off overnight. You have to study and perfect it, and once you get it right, you still have to get an animagus license to do it freely. There's always a catch, huh? Yup, you have to be registered as an animagus. If you use it for wrongful reasons or without a license, it's actually punishable by law. You recall the situation where Hermione was able to blackmail the nasty journalist Rita Skeeter for sneaking into Hogwarts to eavesdrop on conversations as a beetle? Well, that's a big no-no in the magic world. You need to qualify and get put on a public registry before you can join the animal kingdom. You can't change the present through time travel. As we all know from the Prisoner of Azkaban installment, time travel backwards is possible, but only for a very limited amount of time, 5 hours to be exact. But if you were a member of the magic world and wanted to see something you missed, the first thing you need is a time turner. While Tony Stark and friends needed Pym particles to jump between timelines, Harry and co needed a time turner to go back to the exact minute and hour they set on the nifty little timepiece. Avengers Endgame stressed the fact that going back in time to change something doesn't erase the present, but it works differently here. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, most things that happened in real time were the result of Hermione and Harry's actions when they jumped back to the past and surreptitiously interacted with their past selves. Everything from Hermione throwing rocks to attract Harry's attention, to Buckbeak not actually being executed, and down to saving Sirius from the Dementors were all incidents that happened on both sides of the time turner's use. It didn't change the course of events that would create a new timeline or series of new outcomes in the present. There is one strict rule though, as Dumbledore explained to Harry and Hermione: they couldn't be seen by anyone, especially their past selves. Otherwise it would damage the course of time and lead to a disruption in the natural order of things. So no matter how much you wanted to, it would be impossible to mimic that doppelganger Spider-Man meme with your past self, no matter how fun it would be.
That man's an imposter! That man is the imposter!
Foreigners needed permits for wands. As boundless as the world of wizardry is, some rules strangely apply to nationality. Based on where some wizards come from, it impacts the permits they require to be actual wizards. Why is that a real thing? Because back in the 19th century, American wizards could risk execution if they pranced around the magical world without permits for their wands. It was a way to keep track of who was an outsider coming into the magical world and who could be trusted with wands. You can get stopped by officials and asked to show your ID, meaning the magic world and real world aren't that different. Aside from the flying brooms, of course. Magic can't be used outside of Hogwarts until coming of age. Turns out that magic isn't one of those birthright abilities that wizards and witches can just exercise from childhood. According to the Ministry of Magic, there are rules that prevent the use of magic outside of Hogwarts if you're under the age of 17. The Ministry demands that you be of age the same way bars and clubs in the real world treat people who need to be above 18 and have an ID in order to go anywhere and do anything even remotely fun. In conclusion, both real life and magic life only start at 18. Boo. Did Malfoy keep a dark secret? Were Ron and Dumbledore the same person?
I think I've known for a while.
And did Harry become immortal after defeating the Dark Lord? Of all the crazy fan theories, let's see which ones were confirmed and which remain a fantasy. Malfoy was a werewolf? There are a lot of crazy theories about Draco, but this one is certainly the most insane. Let's see where the fans even got the idea of him becoming a werewolf from. According to this theory, it happened somewhere between the Order of the Phoenix and the Half-Blood Prince. During this time, Malfoy's behavior and appearance changed considerably.
He looks different, don't you think, Draco? You must ill.
He seemed to be exhausted all the time. So some fans recalled one of Voldemort's methods of dealing with his enemies. He'd order Fenrir Greyback, a werewolf, to bite their children, and they assumed that Voldemort ordered Fenrir to attack Draco as a punishment when Lucius failed to deliver the prophecy. Could it be true? Actually, no. Rowling debunked this theory. Draco definitely isn't a werewolf, she wrote on Twitter. There was another reason he looked so pale and sickly in the Half-Blood Prince. He'd secretly just become a Death Eater and was struggling with the knowledge that he had to kill Dumbledore.
Don't you understand? I have to do this.
It was torturing him, so his transformation had nothing to do with becoming a werewolf. Thankfully, fans had more of a point with the next theory. Horcruxes. More Horcruxes.
This is beyond anything I imagined.
The mystery behind the creation of these dark objects led to a variety of theories, and one of them was confirmed. Pottermore revealed that when Voldemort inhabited Quirrell's body in the Sorcerer's Stone, he corrupted him from the inside, all because the professor was his temporary Horcrux. And during the time the Dark Lord lacked his own fully functioning body, he probably created more. He did it in the hope that he'd survive, find his accomplices, and be reborn. In the Goblet of Fire, for example, we see him in the body of what seems to be a baby. So it's possible that Voldemort was able to possess a child's body and get full control over it. And there's one more theory about Horcruxes, but it doesn't seem to be true. Harry affected the Dursleys.
What happened?
I swear I don't know!
We all remember how being close to a Horcrux affects a person negatively. Even Ron lashed out at his best friends after wearing Slytherin's locket for too long. And we also know that Harry was a Horcrux as well. So what if the Dursleys were so horrible to him because this part of Harry had a bad effect on them?
No way.
This theory might sound logical for those who like to see the good and bad people, but in fact, the Dursleys didn't need any outside influence to be cruel to their nephew. It's a known fact that Petunia hated Lily because she was a witch.
I was the only one to see her for what she was. A freak.
And Vernon was also quite an unpleasant man who despised magic. So it's completely logical that they never loved Harry. Besides, if the Chosen One had this kind of influence on others, why did his friends love him so much? At least at the end of the series, one member of the Dursley family changed his attitude, and it happened way before the Horcrux inside Harry was destroyed. The reason for Dudley's transformation.
Expecto Patronum!
An encounter with a Dementor in the Order of the Phoenix became a turning point for Harry's cousin. Being a Muggle, he didn't see the creature hanging above him, and yet he felt its influence. We know that Dementors cause someone's worst memories to come to the surface. According to a fan theory, for Dudley, it was the thought of how he bullied others, and eventually, this experience changed him. You can see in the books that from that moment, Dudley becomes more concerned about Harry, and even a deleted scene in the Deathly Hallows movie showed it.
I don't think you're a waste of space.
So, was this theory correct? Yes. J.K. Rowling herself even confirmed that's exactly what happened. My feeling is that he saw himself exactly for what he was, and for a boy that spoiled, that would be terrifying, she commented. Discussing characters' lives after the defeat of Voldemort, the writer added one more thing. Harry and Dudley kept in touch, and there was no beef between them. It's nice to know that the younger Dursley managed to change. But what if the whole thing was a mirage?
There's no such thing as magic.
We're not just talking about the Dementor attack or what happened next. According to another fan theory, the entire plot of all 7 books was only a hallucination. Harry imagined it all as a way of escaping the miserable life he lived in a cupboard under the stairs. He wasn't actually a wizard or the boy who lived. He never went to Hogwarts, didn't have any friends, and there was no Voldemort. It was just his imagination, a coping mechanism caused by the suffering he endured as a child. It all sounds really depressing. Thankfully, this theory was never confirmed, and we know that Harry actually got to defeat evil and live with the people who loved him. Now, let's move on to theories about other parts of the Potterverse. Azkaban was used to contain Dementors. The theory suggests that the prison was built to keep these ghastly creatures in one place and prevent them from hurting people. Pottermore confirmed that it was exactly the point and described how it happened. It turns out that Dementors were on Azkaban Island even before the prison existed. It was home to a very dark sorcerer who did unspeakable things there. After he was gone, the Ministry of Magic decided against destroying the place and instead built a prison on the island. It seemed to be a win-win situation for the government. Firstly, prisoners would quickly stop being dangerous in Azkaban, and very rarely would someone escape. And secondly, Dementors had souls to feed on, so they could be confined there. It all sounds pretty morbid, but it makes a lot of sense. Now let's find out if fans were right about this gruesome theory. The Afterlife Baby. After Voldemort Avada Kedavra Harry, the boy found himself in a strange place. It looked like King Cross's station. And under one of the benches, Harry found an odd little baby lying on the ground. It was mutilated and writhing in pain. Neither the book nor the movie explained precisely what it was, yet the film gave a subtle hint. The so-called baby had Voldemort's face. So fans quickly began to speculate that it represented the Dark Lord or his soul. J.K. Rowling confirmed that they were right. When Voldemort attacks Harry, they both fall temporarily unconscious, and both their souls, Harry's undamaged and healthy, Voldemort's stunted and maimed, appear in the limbo where Harry meets Dumbledore. That baby thing showed just how much the Dark Lord had damaged his soul through his actions. And what awful fate awaited him in the afterlife. Now we're moving on to one of the most insane theories about the wizarding world. Ron is Dumbledore. Yeah, you heard that right. Some fans assume that those two were one and the same person, and Dumbledore was essentially a time-traveling Ron. Let me explain in more detail. Apparently, a grown-up Ron decided to go back in time when he was a kid to become Harry's mentor.
Well, being me has its privileges.
If it still doesn't make sense, let me try again. The theory appeared because fans noticed that the two had some similarities. Both of them were tall and thin, and their noses had the same shape. Plus, we know that Ron had red hair, and it was revealed that Dumbledore's hair was red when he was younger too. Next, both of them loved sweets.
A lot. Earwax.
And Dumbledore once said that he had a scar on his left leg, while we remember that Ron broke his leg in The Prisoner of Azkaban. But more convincing is how Dumbledore always seemed to know everything about Harry. Was it because he'd actually lived through the events? No, it wasn't. The theory was at its peak of popularity before the final book was released. It revealed Dumbledore's backstory and his family tragedy. And then J.K. Rowling officially disproved it. But another theory about Ron was actually confirmed. And it's a sweet one. Hermione's favorite smell. In The Half-Blood Prince, Professor Slughorn showed students a variety of potions. One of them was a powerful love potion called Amortentia. What is particularly special about it is that it smells different to everyone. Each person would get a whiff of their favorite fragrances. When Hermione tried it, she smelled parchment paper, freshly mown grass, and
Spearmint toothpaste.
well, she was clearly embarrassed about the last one. So fans assumed that it was something about Ron, like the smell of his hair, for example. And later, Rowling confirmed that it was exactly that. The author had Ron's hair in mind when she was writing that scene. And she explained that if Hermione had revealed it, she would have shown her attraction to the boy way too early. And as if we didn't notice it anyway, right? Now, the final theory we're going to discuss is Harry is immortal.
I'm ready to die.
This one goes back to the prophecy. It says that either Voldemort or Harry must die at the hand of the other. Some fans interpreted this to mean that the only way one of them could die was for the other to kill him. And if Voldemort is no more, then no one and nothing else can kill Harry. He'll forever remain the boy who lived. But if it's true, it would be like a punishment for Harry, because it would mean that all his loved ones would die and he'd be all alone again. So it's actually quite a tragic twist for him. But neither Pottermore nor Rowling ever confirmed the theory, so it's safe to say that it isn't true. Phew. Do you have any Potterverse theories of your own? Share them in the comments. The Harry Potter franchise revealed multiple secrets of the wizarding world, but it failed to answer all of our questions. From the mystery of wizarding kids' basic education,
What an idiot.
to the theory on how magical portraits work, and everything we still don't understand about Horcruxes.
I knew then this was a different kind of magic. Very dark, very powerful.
Here are the mysteries the Harry Potter series left behind. What do wizard kids do before Hogwarts? In the magical world of Potterverse, once you turn 11, you get a letter. It invites you to come to the best school of witchcraft and wizardry to learn all about spells, jinxes, potions, and other things. For kids from Muggle families, this means that they have to quit their formal education. After all, they went to a regular school before that.
Don't be so stupid. You're going to go to the state school where you belong.
But what about the children who grow up in wizard households? It's unlikely that they go to Muggle schools before they turn 11 to learn how to read, write, count, and all that stuff. Even if it is an option, it's weird to even imagine, for example, any of the Weasley kids going there. And surely it's risky for the Statute of Secrecy, because, you know, kids talk. Another option is that they are homeschooled. This one's a bit more likely, at least for the pure-blooded families who are proud of their ancestry, like the Malfoys, for example. At the same time, the quality of this homeschooling is rather doubtful. After all, not just any parent can teach basic skills. Luckily for Harry, the Dursleys didn't have to homeschool him. But here's another question about the boy who lived. Why is Harry so rich? Remember those heaps of galleons we saw in the first film in his Gringotts vault?
Didn't think your mum and dad would leave you with nothing though, did you?
It allowed him to live in the wizarding world without thinking about where to get money. Quite a nice bonus, right? Because if, along with Voldemort constantly on his tail, Harry had trouble buying new robes, that would make his life unnecessarily harder. So he must have been extremely thankful to his parents for leaving him such a fortune. But the question remains, where did they get all that money from? To help you understand exactly how much Harry was left with, some die-hard fans calculated it all in Muggle terms, and it turns out to be around $300,000. J.K. Rowling once revealed that it all came from James's father, who was a rich and famous magician, and that's pretty much all we know. One bonus about being a wizard is they don't have to waste money on mail since most of them have owls. Speaking of which, how does Owl Post work? It's actually pretty cool that these birds are so clever in the wizarding world. You just tell one where to send your letter or parcel, and it takes it right there. So convenient, right? And when it comes to the movies, it all looks super cinematic, especially when we see dozens of owls flying into the Great Hall delivering the morning mail. but if you dig deeper, you'll see some holes. For example, in the first movie, multiple owls try to deliver the Hogwarts letter to Harry. The movie shows them sitting all over number 4, Privet Drive. Considering how important it is to keep the wizarding world a secret from Muggles, isn't sending so many owls to a single house too suspicious? Then in the second film, Dobby reveals that he intercepted Harry's letters. How exactly did he do that if an owl always has to deliver mail to the exact person it's addressed to? You only hope that Dobby didn't hurt those poor birds. However, there are creatures that won't let anyone harm them. Why didn't Harry see Thestrals before?
I can see them too.
In the Order of the Phoenix, we learn about the existence of these winged horses. It turns out that only those who've witnessed death can see them. And since Cedric Diggory died right in front of Harry, these creatures become visible to him. But that doesn't add up. Harry actually witnessed a murder when he was much younger. After all, Voldemort killed his mother right in front of him. He even had flashbacks of her cries when Dementors approached him, remember? So how come he never saw Thestrals before? J.K. Rowling clarified this question a few years after the series was over. She said that Harry didn't see Thestrals sooner because he couldn't fully understand his mom's death due to his young age. Yeah, that makes sense, but let's not forget that he also saw Professor Quirrell die at the end of his first year in Hogwarts. Doesn't that count? So some fans still think it was a plot hole that Rowling tried to explain but couldn't do so fully. If you're still not confused about the wizarding world, let's move on to the next question. What's the purpose of the Veil? The death of Sirius Black was the most tragic event in the Order of the Phoenix, if not the entire series. But do we even know what exactly happened in this scene? Let's look at it again. After Bellatrix casts a curse, Sirius takes a step into this weird arch, and then he just disappears into it and never comes back. We later discover that this thing is called the Veil, but it's never explained why the Department of Mysteries has it. And we don't know what its purpose is. On top of that, we have no idea what it does to a person who crosses the Veil. It seems to be a barrier between the world of the living and the dead, but does one actually die or shift to another dimension or something? Like a Dementor's kiss, which doesn't kill a person but leaves it as an empty shell without a soul. It's quite possible that the Veil does something similar, yet it's never clarified. What's more, in the book, Harry and Luna hear voices coming from it, voices that no one else can hear. But again, we get no further explanation. Does anyone have any theories as to what the Veil is? Share them in the comments below while we move on to the next mystery. What's the deal with magical portraits? They can talk, move, visit other portraits, and they even have feelings.
Amazing! Just with my voice!
But how's that possible, even with magic involved? Meanwhile, Harry had a photo of his parents who waved and smiled at him but never talked. Do portraits and photos work differently? Guess we'll never know. But that's not all. Another mystery seems to be a plot hole for some fans. Why didn't Harry consult Dumbledore's portrait after his death? Like all the other Hogwarts headmasters, it appeared in his study right after the tragic event. Weirdly, Harry didn't consider approaching it to ask questions about the Horcruxes or anything else. Wouldn't his painting have all the answers like the real Dumbledore? Well, maybe it wouldn't. It's just a theory, but wizarding portraits can contain memories about the people painted in them. But they can also hold a mark of the person who created them. Each painter has his own feelings about the person he paints. Perhaps that impacts the final result? So in the end, the painting simply becomes a projection, the way the painter saw this person. If that's true, Dumbledore's portrait wouldn't have been able to discuss the Horcruxes because the painter didn't know anything about them. And this leads us to the next question. How do Horcruxes actually work? We're aware that it's the darkest magic there is, but still, we want to know more. As we read in the books, no wizard could split his soul into more than 2 parts, except for Voldemort, of course, who managed to create as many as 7, one he didn't even know about. But how exactly did he do it? It can't only be because he was the cruelest or most determined wizard, right?
But only I can live forever.
And here's an even more important issue. The Half-Blood Prince book says that, to create a Horcrux, one needs to say a specific spell. Okay, we accept the fact that that was never shared, but it makes us doubt that Voldemort didn't know that he unintentionally made Harry a Horcrux as he tried to kill him. Like, did he say the incantation in the moment and then forget about it? Okay, let's assume that it was an accident. Does it mean that any murderer can inadvertently create a Horcrux and just leave a piece of his soul somewhere? So many mysteries. Let's talk about some non-dark stuff now. How was Hermione's final year at Hogwarts? We know for a fact that our favorite know-it-all came back to school after they defeated Voldemort. While Harry and Ron couldn't care less about their studies, she just had to take her newts. Since Hermione returned as a 7th-year student, it means that she was in the same class as Ginny and Luna. Boy, would we have liked to see their interactions. Hermione was probably more anxious about her exams than about defeating Voldemort. Well, at least her final year at Hogwarts was finally peaceful, and no life-threatening danger came her way. So it would be less of a fantasy drama and more of a teenage sitcom? With Hermione as the lead, it'd be a pleasure to watch for sure. So hey, creators of the upcoming Harry Potter series, we have a brilliant idea for a spin-off here. For most fans, the Harry Potter books are superior to the movies. But at the same time, sometimes the films had certain modifications that made the story even better.
That's totally barbaric.
How did the 4th movie add some hilarious suffering for Ron? Which scene showed Harry as a relatable teen? And why did the ending make so much more sense in the movie?
I'm just saying it could be a contributing factor.
The Yule Ball preparations. With all the evil stuff coming, the Goblet of Fire didn't leave a lot of time for cheering. But the movie still managed to fit in some comic relief with a sequence that wasn't in the books. It showed the students learning how to dance for the upcoming Yule Ball. And the highlight of the scene was Professor McGonagall making Ron dance with her.
Place your right hand on my waist.
What? Weasley's face was everything. As was Fred and George's jokes and everyone's laughter.
Never gonna let me forget this, are you?
Never. That moment probably caused Ron more suffering than any combat with the Death Eaters, and it wasn't the only reason why the dance lesson scene was so incredible. It also gave us this unforgettable phrase.
Behaving like a babbling, bumbling band of baboons.
Try saying that 5 times fast.
To dance is to let the body...
Now, we're moving on to the next thing that the movies did better. I must not tell lies.
I really hate children.
Dolores Umbridge was one of the most hated characters in the whole franchise. Even more hated than Voldemort himself. Among other dreadful things she did was making Harry write lines with her special quill. I must not tell lies was the phrase he had to scribble, and that got scribbled into his hand. In the book, Umbridge often said that she wanted the message to settle into the boy's head. And the movie added a scene showing that she actually succeeded. When Harry and Hermione take Umbridge to the Forbidden Forest to lure her away, a herd of centaurs attack her. As they're taking her with them, she pleads to Harry to tell them that she means no harm. But Harry's response is savage.
I'm sorry, Professor. I must not tell lies.
Absolutely epic. And just what this despicable woman deserved. Now let's talk about a character we all loved. Nice one, James. The books often highlighted how much Harry resembled his father, and Sirius was probably the one who saw it more than others. The 5th movie shows this very well. Unlike the book, it has a scene where Harry fights alongside his godfather, and they even get to talk a bit.
You've done beautifully. Now let me take it from here.
While in the book, Harry tried to retreat and let the Order fight, in the movie, he stays right there. And after he casts a spell, Black says an interesting phrase without even noticing it himself.
Nice one, James!
This is a blink and you'll miss it moment, but it has a lot of meaning. It reveals that Sirius sees his late friend living on in his godson. The saddest thing about it is that this phrase was the last thing he uttered, because just moments after, he went behind the veil, breaking the hearts of every single fan. And here's another, much less heartbreaking moment from the saga. Dobby, the free elf. Getting away from his master was probably one of Dobby's happiest moments. In the Chamber of Secrets book, it happened in quite a weird way. Harry put Riddle's diary inside his sock and then gave it to Mr. Malfoy. In the movie, he did the opposite, and it made much more sense. The boy puts his sock inside the book, and Lucius, unaware of it, passes it to Dobby. Done this way, the scene has more meaning and comes as a surprise to the audience, as well as to the characters.
Master has given Dobby a shock.
What? I didn't...
Right afterwards, Mr. Malfoy snaps at Harry and even almost uses the killing curse on him. Would be a waste if he proceeded with the spell, right? And we're moving on. Not so humble Harry. In the books, he's quite a modest young man who doesn't think too highly of himself. For example, when Hermione offers to create a study group in the Order of the Phoenix, Harry doubts that he can teach them. He says that he never achieved success by himself, as help would always come from somewhere else. And above all, he doesn't enjoy being the chosen one, unlike movie Harry.
But I am the chosen one. Okay, sorry.
For many fans, this moment became a favorite, not only because it was really funny, but it also showed another side of Harry. In this scene, he acts like a typical teenager who wants to goof around, and who lightens up when he learns that an attractive girl likes him. Seeing him so human and so relatable after everything he's been through was pretty cool. And so was watching this sweet scene. Harry and Hermione's dance. Both Deathly Hallows movies were filled with dark and evil moments. So if it wasn't for heartwarming scenes like this one, they would be quite depressing to watch. The dance also shows the strong connection between Harry and Hermione. As both of them grew up in Muggle families, it was nice to see them enjoy a simple moment and just dance to some random Muggle song. What's more, this scene reminds us that Harry and Hermione are still kids. And here's one more moment from the movies that highlighted the importance of friendship. The battle in the Department of Mysteries. Lots of things about this sequence are different if you compare the book and movie, and according to many fans, the film did it better. Among other things, it's more dynamic and epic. But more importantly, it gives the center stage not only to Harry, but also to his friends. The Order of the Phoenix book doesn't have this interaction, for example.
How's Mum and Dad?
Better now they're about to be avenged.
Seeing Neville standing up to Bellatrix? Give me more of that. Plus, the movie doesn't split up Harry and his friends into couples like the book did. They fight against the Death Eaters all together. And here's another important element that happens when Harry gets possessed by Voldemort. The curse is lifted as soon as he sees his friends and feels their love and his own love for them. This sequence of touching moments carries a huge meaning, because it helps Harry understand why he's actually stronger than the Dark Lord.
You're the weak one, and you'll never know love or friendship.
It becomes clear to viewers right away why Voldemort can no longer possess him. It's impossible for him to stay in the body of a person who has the ability to love that strongly. Little did he know that one of his Death Eaters also knew what love was. Many things about Snape. The Professor of Potions is much more beloved among movie fans than among book fans. That's thanks partly to the charisma of Alan Rickman. I mean, even when he kills Dumbledore, you can't hate him, can you? The book Snape seems to be a worse person. There are countless moments when he's totally unfair to Harry and others. Meanwhile, the movies give him more redeeming qualities. For example, in a subtle but memorable moment in the Prisoner of Azkaban movie, we see Snape shielding the trio with his body. He protects them against Lupin when he turns into a werewolf. And the way he dies is also different. In the book, Snape's final words are, "Look at me." But in the movie, you know what he says.
You have your mother's eyes.
This line is very powerful. It shows that Snape finally sees Lily and Harry, and not only James, whom he hated so much. It also adds so much gravity to his death, because in his final moments, Snape essentially looks into the eyes of the woman he's loved his whole life. And before you cry your eyes out, here's one more thing that was better in the movie. The end of the Elder Wand. After the war is over and Voldemort is gone for good, Harry has to decide what to do with the world's most powerful wand. In the book, he returns it to Dumbledore's grave, but that actually doesn't make any sense. I mean, the wand was stolen from there. Who could guarantee that some other evil wizard wouldn't come one day and steal it again? Especially if disarming Harry is all it takes to become its master. The film had a more logical approach. Now that the Elder Wand is broken in half, it no longer has power, and no one else can use it for good or bad reasons. That truly is a good and smart conclusion to the story, don't you think?
And that's a wrap on our magical Harry Potter binge. We hope you had as much fun as we did. Let us know in the comments which part surprised you the most, and what you want to see in our next stream. Mischief managed.